Hello, everybody. How about it's time for some whiskey and bagels? Penny, how are you?
Well, good evening, Brandon. I'm going to introduce myself as astrologer and life coach, Penny Dix.
And I'm conscious medium Brandon Russ, taking all the tools we have of spirituality, consciousness, and bringing them all together for our life path. Boy, we've got a crazy week coming up here. It's not that we ever really have tame weeks, although last week seemed to be kind of like this kind of like calmness, but this week, and we were talking just in the pre-conversation, it's almost like we're hitting the bottom of the pool and we're about to kind of like spring load up. Boy, oh boy, this is going to get crazy, isn't it?
It is, and it's interesting because visually, I haven't seen it, but you might be able to see it in States. Visually, all of the planets are in a kind of line at the moment, so that if you get up before dawn, I'm never up before dawn.
So right
nice
before
girl.
you go to sleep.
Maybe. So they're all going to be, you would actually be able to see all the planets.
Yeah, they go right
without a telescope.
Yeah, and it's
Cool.
it's lining up. I remember in like 1980 something, all of the planets were lined up in a direct line straight out through the universe. And I remember it. That was actually like my first foray into astrology. I'm like, what is astrology? What is, what are these things? And I know how much that inspired me. So I'm hoping that's going to inspire some people right now with that lineup. And actually, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn have been lined up for a little while, but now Venus has fallen into line, Mercury's fallen into line.
Yeah.
Pluto is a really tough find, but Pluto's also lined up into that. Uranus is actually brighter than Neptune. I got that backwards. Neptune is brighter than Uranus. For some reason. It has to do with the reflections of the rings where, and again, this is the physics of it, where Uranus kind of has, where Saturn's like this to our perspective, Uranus is like this, and it actually takes away the glow from it. Neptune has a thin ring around it, but it kind of captures the light differently. There's optics involved with this, but great viewing with it. Yeah, of course, Saturn.
Saturn. This is my Saturn.
I know you are. You're the mama planet. Here we go. I'll be your Jupiter. Oh gosh, you're terrible. You're terrible. I think that down the road, I think we should like dress in costume, and I think you should dress as, I'll dress like Zeus.
I'll dress like Aphrodite.
If you don't mind. If you don't mind.
Oh my God, no, she's naked.
Lesbo. I don't know. Whatever you're into. I don't know. The island speaks to you differently.
It's very hot.
Of course it is. And now you're talking to me? Oh, it's like a torture chamber. All right. So listen, one of the interesting things coming up here, not only do we have that alignment, which by the way, astrologically, the way that looks on a chart is that it looks very kind of scattered. So we've got almost like a wheel going on. We've got a few, Gemini gets a lot of action right now. I'm going to pull up that chart from my end of it. Okay. And yeah, I'm using a new friend here. Some of our old friends aren't really kind of paying attention. Look at that spray. What's that, love?
Don't cut my head off like you did in our video
that one thing
premiered next week.
Listen, I'm exploring my 8th house and I had to do that to finish. So it's terrible. Oh my gosh. I promise I'll edit some of this out. I don't know which parts. I won't cut out your head. But when we talk about the planets lining up, this is kind of what it looks like in a chart, right? So Mercury just kind of fell into line here. You're going straight across. Everybody is really represented here. In this moon work, we've got to talk about this new moon in Cancer coming up, and we've got to get prepared for it. I think this is, we just had the full moon in Sagittarius that made people very impulsive. There was a lot of things that like you may have personally been like, oh, I'll give it a try. Oh, I'll do this. Now we're into the new moon in Cancer. And typically, what's your take as an astrologer on the new moon in Cancer? And then, I know we've got some really interesting lineups here for this.
Well, the new moon in Cancer brings in, of course, the feminine. And I just think that it's extraordinary that I looked at the news just before we started tonight to
Mhm.
see that the US had overturned the abortion law in the United States. So that basically means, and you'll be able to explain it better than me,
Yeah,
that women
it's
are losing the right to choose. And Cancer is about the moon, it's about mother. The moon rules Cancer. And this, I just wonder whether with this new moon energy next week, which it's actually on the 28th, 29th, depending where you are on the planet, but I just wonder whether something else is going to happen or be born out of this.
well,
Because a
listen,
new moon is about birth, it's about bringing something in.
just about you know, and we shared this a little bit. The US landscape right now is ugly. You know, it is just, I mean, we've got raids happening for former top aides and top heads of officials. It's very clear that I'll say it, and I don't really care if it gets backlash. Donald J. Trump tried to overthrow the government. He absolutely tried to overthrow. He tried to usurp our process. And by definition, is it overthrowing the government? I don't know, but it certainly was not it's not a good look for a country that, you know, prides itself on our process and our uniqueness, our, you know, the fact that our laws are built around the idea that we have freedom and it doesn't weigh to just one person or break away from the king. You can't then act like a king. So you have that going on, and of course the idea that Roe versus Wade is reversed is beyond a power struggle. It is a distraction. Astrologically, aren't we square? Isn't Saturn square to the moon?
No, it's actually Jupiter that is square the new moon.
Okay,
And
so
Jupiter in Aries, it's expanding everything, and it's going to expand the negative as well as the positive.
women
The
are going
other
to take to the streets. Women are going to take to the streets here.
guess what? Guess
Yeah.
what? Mars is conjunct Eris. You remember the lovely story I told you about
Yes.
Eris?
Yeah.
Well,
Go see our other
Eris
videos.
actually,
Yeah.
Eris is about people coming out on the streets and rebelling.
Yeah.
And Mars conjunct Eris in Aries, there are going to be
Right near Jupiter.
yeah.
Yep.
I just fear there's going to be a lot of activity on the streets, and not just in the US about this abortion law,
Yeah.
but actually it's happening in the UK
Sure.
because of the cost of living, and there's a lot of anger against our current government.
And the Brexit idea, and then France went full right wing, you know, and that's, I mean, you're seeing these things that are, you know, France to me, and again, this is just an American's, you know, point of view. I mean, I saw it as, you know, France kind of being this you know, not necessarily passive, but very kind of like, we might not have the best, you know, system of laws, but we definitely have our process down. That election was, we're going to change the process. And it's funny, people like Trump are like, see, we told you this is a conservative movement. By the way, under no circumstance was Donald Trump ever conservative. He's an opportunist. He just decided which party was most, because he has been both Democrat and Republican 4 different times in his life. He has changed parties 4 times. Just to let you know.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because this new moon, apart from Mars being conjunct Eris, Pluto, retrograde in Capricorn, is squaring Mars and Eris. So you think of the symbolism of that.
Yeah.
With what I know we're going to be discussing soon about the Pluto return in the United States. This is massive.
Oh,
this is what's happened today with the Roe versus Wade episode.
I think it's one domino. It's one domino. And it's funny, I'm going to do a shameless plug here. We're going to turn this video around today and get it out as soon as possible. But next Wednesday, you can see the Penny and Brandon chart review of one another. It's a lot of fun. Jump into that. We also have some other specials that we're going to be doing, like the Pluto returns. We're going to have that out first week of July. as we go into that. We've been in the return for some time, but let's celebrate it with something fun. We're going to have a couple of parts to that, and I think you guys are going to love it. Not only is it educational, but it also brings you through to kind of understanding what it means to you. And we're talking a lot of chaos here. We really are talking a lot of chaos. And my take on Trump as a political person was always about chaos. And then when I looked at the astrology, I really saw it. I'm actually going to release my Trump video next week as well, because it's important. I've been doing so much research and so many things, and January 6th was not a good day for him. It was a horrible day. Now I'm taking a look at things like the stop marks along the way. And from a society standpoint, boy, oh boy, this is a necessary thing though. This is a really necessary thing. And back on the Cancer new moon, this is like an emotional upheaval. This is you really taking stock in your emotional stuff. Now, if you're on a personal journey with this, go back to when we had our eclipses. And by the way, we've got another one coming later on this year. This is one of those graph points that you go, oh, this day, right? This time period, this week. Because what you're recognizing, this new moon is actually it's almost like the Sagittarius full moon was like a last ditched effort to do whatever you thought was fun. Where now this new moon in Cancer comes in, and not only is it ultimate accountability, it's feminine divine. It's actually the things that will reconcile your intuition. Maybe you've been acting and behaving in a way that doesn't really make sense, to your true essence. What's that?
Guess what's conjunct the new moon, the sun and the moon? Lilith.
Yeah, Lilith, of course. So this is your comeuppance of saying, oh gosh, I can't be like that. Intuitively, I can't act this way. Emotionally, I can't act this way. Maybe you're into shenanigans and you're like, oh gosh, I can't do those shenanigans. Maybe it's going back to like old addictions and pulling that out and examining that. Maybe it's old behaviors, old patterns. And with it being family based, I mean, it's the one thing of saying, your family will always be there. Well, the Cancer new moon will always be there. It will always be that reminder of like, you can create a safe space, but it's also touching the bottom of the pool before you push off to come back up for air. Like there's some things astrologically. I'm going to pull up the chart again, because I want to comment on one piece of it that I saw. Not only do you have this kind of like very nice alignment, you also see for the first time in a while, the sun leading the left to right. Right. Because you usually see the sun kind of in the middle of it. And again, the ascending sitting here in Virgo, which I thought was funny. Like, of course, we're trying to be like, and again, this is our snapshot in time today when we pulled this. But just that I would pull this as it's sitting in there. Look at all of this action in the 8th house. Look at all of this action in the 9th house. This is about our undoing, our rebellion, the depth of who we are and who we're recreating. The 9th house is about our learning, and our 10th house is about the very public nature of what's going on. You've got the 10th house. What do we have in the 10th house? I mean, we've got the sun's in the 10th house, holy. And it's sitting there in Gemini.
Mercury.
What's that?
You've got the sun in Cancer there, and you've got Mercury in Gemini there.
Yeah. So, and you're sitting there in the 10th house. So this is people doing power moves. You have people, and again, Pluto's in Capricorn. It's almost in opposition, not quite, but you've got the sun opposite of Pluto. And that I think is going to really kind of drop trow on a lot of this stuff. I mean, Pluto went retrograde. When people talk about the subtleties of retrogrades, people think of like the organically, like, oh no, it's bad. When Mercury goes retrograde, your computer fails, all that stuff. Capricorn going retrograde. Today's my first day, everybody. Pluto going retrograde. You can still laugh at each other. This is the part where it's like, you've got to edit that out, dear. You can't say the signs don't go retrograde, you jackwagon. I knew you were an American. You're just going to make shit up. So Pluto going retrograde, when Saturn, when Uranus, when all of the exterior planets go retrograde, it's about positioning. It's about positioning so that then there are true lessons formed. This Pluto sitting in Capricorn, going retrograde and pulling back from Aquarius a little bit. Like it's moving away from Aquarius. Like that's the retrograde right here. When we talk about moving into the age of Aquarius, they were actually really talking about Pluto going into Aquarius, which is 2024. So we've got all of these, arguments going on about, and it's in the fifth house. We have to look at how we're creating. We have to look at what we're doing. It's actually the perfect storm to not only have a rebellion, but also have a recreation, right? So this is personal life. That's why you see so many people blowing up their lives right now. You just see it. I have a friend of mine married, 14 years, pillar of the community, announced his divorce. And he wasn't, I mean, I'm sure there were rumors. I don't get into that. But he was somebody who was very prominent, and he led things through through COVID, through the pandemic. He was in a prominent position where he could have a good voice, and he did that. And I'm sure he just didn't feel the support that he needed to, or vice versa. And that fell apart. So you're seeing a lot of these things kind of bubble up. So the rebellion is kind of here. The other thing that also interests me too is the North Node sitting in Taurus. How
Yes.
On the day-to-day stuff, how much emphasis do you put on the on North Node activity? In a birth chart, it's about your destiny, that things are going to work out, the challenges that you're going to have. But in day-to-day astrology, what's your take on the North Node and its influence, especially here in Taurus?
I think that it becomes about the collective. And I think because if we think of what's happening to the sort of world economy and how there's a huge contraction going on, and many countries are going to have recessions, and there is a cost of living crisis in many parts of the world, then I think this Uranus coming up to be conjunct the North Node in Taurus, you see Taurus is about money. So it is about anything that we rely on. It's about our sort of substance, our bartering tools, our financial energy. And, it's interesting that right now today, the moon is conjunct Uranus and therefore is coming up to conjunct the North Node. So the fact that that news came out, literally 15 minutes before we came on air, about the abortion laws being overturned, the moon is mother. The moon is mothering. And it's Taurus, which is earth. It's quite stuck and fixed. So,
and it's the stubbornness. It's also the second house represented. It's also, so you have the second, and again, I know this sounds confusing at first, but as astrologers, we're going to get this. If Taurus is the second house, right? Aries and Taurus, second house, is sitting in the ninth house. This is you looking at, what are we learning? What's practical? Why is there nonsense going on? Why doesn't this work? The shedding of things, we're beginning to find value. And again, value, whenever you hear Taurus, think value. Whenever you hear second house, think value. What do we value in knowledge? We are a world of fabricated BS lies that, I mean, our entire government was almost overthrown because the president of the United States created, whether it be by direct or by inference, created illicit ballot information for electors and created an alternate reality and almost got it passed through Congress. That's how close we were to having an absolute false government, like within minutes. The vice president's life was in danger up to 40 feet away. The mob was there. Like, okay, now we fast forward to this. They're being brought to task, right? Now you're also having, I don't care, and go back and take a look at our video on Roe v. Wade when that first came out. Boy, oh boy, that'll go hand in hand with this information. Now we're looking at the practicality of Taurus. And by the way, this is, and ninth is about higher learning, education, and your spiritual connection. We're trying to dictate morality. We're trying to legislate morality. That's Taurus sitting in the ninth house going with the North Node of like, what are you guys doing? So there may be a shred of truth to be like, do you really look at this? But that's not the purpose of laws. And that's the challenge in that. So we're going to find a lot of people not value that. I also think the Brexit thing was interesting too. I'm gonna bring this into your court, because I think
Yeah.
Brexit is being called out in some of their inflationary tactics, right? Isn't that, I mean, you're talking about cost of living and some of that, but wasn't it
Yeah,
because they kind of wholesale just like made bullshit up and said, oh yeah, everything's going to be fine, and they were going to outgrow it?
very much, because we really, I don't think any of the British public really fully understood the implications of what Brexit meant.
Yeah.
Apart perhaps from people that really go into it and look at it and think about it, the majority of the British people were talking about, we want England back, we want England back for
Yeah.
us, kind of thing. And it was about immigration and migration. And the thing is, this was just false, because the fact is, and I think the funny thing is that, of course, since Brexit actually happened,
Yeah.
we've had the Afghan crisis. So we took in loads of Afghans. We've had all the sort of, you know, refugees from all over Europe and Africa lobbing themselves into boats and going across the channel. And then, of course, most recently, we've got the Ukrainian crisis.
Sure.
So we've got all the Ukrainian refugees coming in. So in fact, what the British public wanted at the start, which was not to have lots of immigrants coming into the country, which again, to me, is like really taking a step backwards in history. It's just, to me, it's racial. I have to say that.
It was basically built in, you know, when we talk about things, it's funny, the word sovereignty is going to start getting thrown around a lot. And I think, you know, Britain, you know, the UK as a sovereign country is kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, because at one time the sun never set, right? You know, where it was like, hey, we were almost taking over the world, and by taking over the world, we put a flag in your country and said we were ours, right? And the flip side of that, which by the way is exactly the rebellion that we're sensing and feeling here. The US by creation was the place to be like, hey, you go be that melting pot, you go be that place for whatever. We had a serious issue in the 70s and early 80s with Cubans jumping in a boat and getting to Florida. I mean, it was 90 miles and like the crow flies, and they would be risky in rafts and whatever. Now they can walk across the border. And listen, this isn't a conversation about immigration necessarily, but these are the challenges that we face, and it projects into astrology, where it's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to approach it? Now, listen, if 50,000 people on your social rolls overnight, when you haven't accounted for it, is a problem. But smart people can figure out ways. And the way that these smart people are figuring it out is to say, I have a stopgap in this game, whether it's in, you know, the popular vote or whatever, whether it be through voting, whether it be through money positions, whether it be through investments. The dynamic here is that they've chosen to close a border. They've chosen to treat it in whatever way it is that they have, right? Those are the challenges that come back to bite you in the ass, because if you don't choose correctly, the astrology is going to be like, okay, all right, let's see how long that'll work. Astrology is the great parent at the end of the day. Yeah. It's the one that lets you do whatever it is that you want, because you have free will, this gift of free will. We abuse it regularly. And then we get the opportunity of position placements like, hey, it's this type of energy. Notice that when Penny and I talk about astrology, we're always talking about energy. That's one of the things I think we talked early on about this. We never talk about absolutes.
It's a cosmic weather forecast.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it happens rarely now, but clients would come wanting to know what their future holds. And I say, well, actually, I can't tell you what your future holds. I can tell you from the energies, the areas of your life that you might be best focusing on for now.
It's a constant ongoing SWOT analysis. Here's your strengths, here's your weaknesses, here's your opportunities, here's your threats. It is a constant evolution. I'm working with a company right now. And I have skin in the game. So in fairness, I'm saying this, and they're presenting what are known as NFTs, which are kind of the new way. It's kind of how things were taken out of the money markets. It's beyond the Fed. It's beyond transactional business. It's on a blockchain. There's a whole world to it. And getting involved with it has really kind of showed me consciousness, insofar that there's a difference between the stories we tell ourselves. We tell ourselves that we're stable all the time. The astrology is saying, are you sure? Right.
Yes.
And I think, you just had, let's talk about perceived stuff and then present stuff. The perceived stuff is that we live in a safe country and we have a safe neighborhood and we have clean drinking water. Then when you dive in deep and you realize that, oh gosh, there's a little bit of mercury in my water, and then they go, well, it's acceptable. Well, because somebody's dialogue needs it to be acceptable, right? Whether you feel safe or not doesn't, if you pitched your pony to the, oh, I have safe drinking water, is all of a sudden now you're in conflict. And these are the things that happen cyclically, that the energy presents itself. This is as things get uncovered. I think this Cancer new moon is incredibly revealing. Incredibly revealing. You've also got this Pluto angle and Saturn. We haven't really talked about Saturn being in retrograde right here. Let's talk about that before we get out of here. Where's Saturn in our report here?
Well, are we looking at the chart for now or for the new moon? What are we?
Let's take a look at the new moon.
Okay, because first of all, Saturn, excuse me, is coming up again to make a hard square to Uranus. Now, we had that energy all last year, so we're going to get a taste of what we had last year. And, there's going to be this, Uranus wants freedom. Saturn wants restriction. So you've got this tension between these two planets.
And our new moon is on the 9th, right?
No, our new moon is on the 29th.
Oh, gosh, on the 29th. Well, then I'll just...
28th,
I'll back that up if you hear what I'm saying.
It's the
oh, yeah, that's right. You can see our new special on the 29th.
Yes, 8 p.m. Central European time. And it's at what time?
2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And if you watch it, you can enter to win to be a guest on our show and have your chart read. Watch the video for the details. We're giving away readings now. That's pretty cool. All right, so I have this dialed up to June 29th. I've got it in the morning. Roughly these, this is fairly accurate, although it's not specific.
Because actually, for you in the States, it's actually on the 28th. I think you'll find it's a little bit.
There we go. Yeah. Oh, well, that makes sense. That makes sense then.
Okay.
And it's in the 10th house. Hon, there is so much shit going on with this public persona.
And remember, the ascendant is totally different here in Europe. So we've actually got a Gemini ascendant here. Now, what's interesting is that the part of fortune is conjunct the ascendant. So I think ultimately what gets born through, what new initiatives come into play ultimately will be good through this energy. Also that day we have the Venus, of course, has moved out of Taurus. Venus that rules Taurus is now in Gemini. Venus in Gemini, she's in there today.
And by the way, this is a rule of thumb for me when I see this, and this is just in how I learned. Whenever you see something get out of its natural or natal, like Venus and Taurus, Gemini and Aries on either side of it bring an instability, right? So there's strength and comfort. This Venus and Gemini is both sides of the fence coming out in love and worship and the things we find beautiful. You may find things that by the way, also a highly creative time for you artists that need to dig deep, those authors that have had some writer's block. This is a great time for this to just start to pop. Now you got to compare it to your natal chart and how it affects it. But the energy of the weather outside, how it affects you is going to be a little bit different. Wow, what else you got here?
But I think also this Venus in Gemini, especially because it's moved into Gemini in the last few days, and with the Roe versus Wade situation. This is women getting together and talking. This is women communicating. And, you know, when I heard I am going to say this because I think it's important. When I heard the news today, I felt an inner rage and I thought, wow, how powerful is that? Because it was like I was tapping into a collective feminine energy. Because, you know, it's, to me, I just feel it's, you know, and it's probably clear what my side of the fence is with this one, but I just feel that women should have a choice about their bodies. And I don't think that it's up to men to determine what a woman chooses to do with her body.
The only thing I want to correct you, the only thing I want to correct you here, and it's not even a correction as much as it's a perspective. Being a male, I've been blamed for shit I have nothing to do with. We have to target the specific men that are taking away those rights. It's not all men. Does that make sense? Like, and I say that not because I think you made a foe here. I think it's more of, I think that the way that the astrology is showing it is this is going to get very granular, Mr. Trump. This is going to get very granular, Judge Roberts. This is going to get very granular, Prime Minister Johnson. This is going to become very specific, Mr. Putin. This is going to, and by the way, the biggest, we can't not talk about Russia and Ukraine somewhere. There was a mass arresting over the weekend. Was it this weekend or the previous? Of mothers and wives that wanted to know where their soldiers were. Putin's got this women issue on hand. And by the way, guys, this isn't about equal rights. You're equal. This is about you having your personal rights. Quit thinking this is a social issue. It's a personal issue. That is the revolution.
Putin is out of balance. Putin is not in touch with his inner feminine. He hasn't got a clue about the feminine in general.
The guy's all dick. Sorry.
Yeah, you're right. But it's interesting that also today in the news, apparently Ukrainians, I think it's somewhere near Solvenitska, but I can't remember how you pronounce it. They had a car bomb and they blew up the newly installed Russian Muscovite official who was there to kind of take over this part of Ukraine. And he's been blown up and killed, basically. The other thing, which really, really also made me feel very angry, is that according to the news, and I have to say, I know, we don't know, but what was reported is that Putin is going into all the history books in Russia and rewriting the history.
What do you think Trump was doing? I mean, it's the failure to face reality and getting enough people to go along with the story, right? And I will tell you that even in I'm going to tell you why this stuff hits so close to home and why I'm able to see it so easily, because I could have very easily been one of those people. I could have been very easily one of those sycophants, or in my chart, one of the leaders to find enough sycophants to convince enough people. I'm not saying I'm Jim Jones material or David Koresh material, but that leadership model of being able to convince people of how do you control fear? One of the greatest lessons that I learned in doing this work is that love over fear, that fear is actually how fear is dictated on a regular basis. That's why even when we talk about the astrology, we talk about it as energy, not as in imminent danger or whatever. In a perfect world, these are just really tough conversations that we get to the bottom of things, right? Like if we're the HR department, if astrology is the HR department of the world, we kind of sort of are, because we're always taking the temperature of where things are at. We're having tough conversations with the heads of each department going, listen, don't you see where this is not really working? Don't you see that we might have to look a little deeper here? And it's funny. I went ahead and pulled this one up because I think you're just going to laugh at this. Like, come on. He's like go ahead and take a look. He's like all dick. He's like all jackass. I'm sorry. Is that wrong? Like, who takes a fucking picture of this? Like, is he even good looking? Like, I mean, tell me, do you think he's like good looking? Like in a vacuum, he's picking you up at a bar at a cantina. You're like, no, too short. Like, he's only 5'7".
No, he's shorter than me. He'd come up to sort of here.
So what's a good pickup line for Penny? Like, hey, I'd like to climb you. Like, what is that?
No, no. It would be something like, let me think, what would it be? It would be, can I buy you some champagne?
Oh, champagne. And what if they put like the flip at the end of it? They don't just call it champagne, they call it champagne. Like, what if they were like, I'm worldly enough to know 4 different languages I can butcher?
You just turn up, you see, with 2 glasses, champagne glasses,
So
and the bottle in an ice bucket.
This is a moment where feminine energy. So this is a moment where feminine energy likes to be told what to do, and here, take a glass of champagne. Right?
Yeah.
Listen, if everybody would just listen to you, it would be a better place. I'm just telling you. No, but I think we have this genuine crossroads here, and we see it in the stars. We see it in our chart right now. And, I want to remind you guys again, tune in to the 28th and the 29th. I don't know when the hell it is. I know we have a spot in time.
Our premiere is on the 29th, and that is just after the new moon, which is on the 28th, 29th, and it's at 8 o'clock Central European time, 2 p.m. in
Eastern time, Eastern Standard.
Okay.
Yeah, which is 11 a.m. on the West Coast. 11 a.m. on the West Coast. It's yeah, and I love that we're doing this, because I think it's we're figuring out our goal on this. And I think it's also, it was a lot of fun to do. I think you guys are going to really kind of enjoy it. And we talk about how we work together and the things that, like, we drive each other nuts, and, and why I ask completely inappropriate questions sometimes.
Yes.
I'll never forget one of the first times we spoke. I said something and you like left camera because you were crying. And I don't even remember how funny it was, but you were just like, what are the balls on this guy saying this to me? You're like, what is up with you?
I think I then turned to you and I said something like, have I pulled?
My gosh. And then even though we both speak, English. I'm okay at it. You've got
I made you blush? Have I made you blush, Brandon?
A little bit.
Oh,
we're talking about my 8th house.
Power of the feminine.
Well, but listen, though, when you do energy work, you have to pay attention to your feminine energy, just like you had to pay attention to your masculine energy. When we started talking about these things, I'm like, I really like this dialogue. I really, my favorite entertainers, this is a trend in, like, and kind of, especially in Europeans actually led the way in this, but male and female singers singing together, where they kind of have dual parts, where it's almost like it's like Phantom of the Opera, but the metal version of it, or heavier version of it. And I love that music because it tells the story. Right. And I think when we have our perspective, it tells the stories. By the way, that comes up in the video a couple of times. It's kind of interesting. What's that?
What comes up?
The fact that you're representing the feminine energy. I can appreciate the feminine energy. I'll bring up the masculine energy. You appreciate the masculine energy. No, that doesn't come up. We cut that out. We cut that part out, the part that came up. You're terrible. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm sorry. Did I make you blush? All right. Listen, let's get out of here for this week. We've got other things we're going to jump into. We've got to prepare for. Yeah, I know. I can't believe I did that. So this is a true story. So I'm really proud of this. I'm doing the editing. I'm doing all of this work. Oh my gosh, I chopped her head off. It was kind of funny for like 20 seconds. And then I realized what I did. I had moved the resolution so high because I wanted it to be really crisp, get that beautiful sunshine that you are on film correctly. And it was so fine that it cut her off. She was basically right here, everybody. She was right here. And it was, although impressive, and I'm sure we would have gotten a lot of views, we will not exploit you like that. Just like my eyes are up here. They're up here.
I'm just gonna, I think I signed my reply to you Anne Boleyn, Queen of England, the Tower of London.
I'm done with this one. That's terrible. All right, Penny, listen, everybody have a great week. We're going to see you soon. Be sure to tune in next week. Of course, we're going to have our other videos up as well. We've got a lot of specials because there's deeper dives that we've got to spend on these things. And Penny, once again, I want to give you the heart tap. Tell everyone we care and love for one another. Be sure to like and subscribe both of our pages and get them out there. I'll see you guys soon.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, Penny. Beautiful.